I'm Marlene Whitaker, 67 years old, and the first thing I do each morning is check the clock, because I know that within the hour, this house won't be mine anymore. Not really. The voices will rise, doors will slam. Someone will ask for money, and the kitchen will fill with noise and need. I used to think a full house meant love. Now it just means unpaid bills and cold toast. 4 years ago, I buried my husband after 45 years of marriage. He died with a fork in his hand, an apple pie on his plate, and nothing has been the same since that night. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own home. I was born and raised in Wabash, Indiana. Worked as a homemaker most of my life. Lloyd always said he'd take care of the money, and he did right up until he didn't. When he passed, the house we bought together felt enormous. Quiet in a way that echoed. The kids came in for the funeral. Terrence brought his wife Jolene, and Wanda came with her husband Paul and their 3 kids. There were hugs and casseroles and all the right words. A week later, I sat in that kitchen and realized no one was coming back. Then Terrence called, said they needed to save for a down payment and moving in would help. A month after that, Wanda's landlord raised the rent, and she asked if they could stay for just a little while. Of course I said yes. What mother wouldn't? That was 4 years ago. Now I have no space of my own. My name's still on the mortgage, but my decisions don't seem to matter anymore. My bedroom is the only room where I can close a door. Though that doesn't stop my granddaughter Sadie from walking in to borrow my lotion or my earrings, or just sit on the bed without asking. Her younger brother Caleb hides in my closet when they play hide and seek. Their little sister Hazel once spilled a whole bottle of grape juice on my quilt and walked away like nothing happened. I make breakfast every morning. Nobody asks me to. Nobody thanks me either. Terrence grabs toast on his way to work at the call center. Jolene asks me to pick up the kids because she's working late at the accountant's office. Wanda is always in a meeting. Paul barely says a word. The children complain about the food, the temperature, their clothes. The house runs on autopilot, powered by my hands, my money, and my silence. When I get home from my shift at the hardware store, I clean up dishes I didn't eat from. Fold laundry I didn't wear. Listen to Wanda remind me not to lock the door, because they'll be coming home late. And somehow, even though I pay for the heating and the groceries and the roof that still leaks above the laundry room, I'm the one they say is lucky to have them around. Yesterday, I found a letter from the utility company. It said we owed $3,700. That if we didn't pay by Friday, we'd lose power, gas, and water. 3 months overdue, and I remembered Terrence had offered to take the bills off my plate, said he'd handle them. I gave him the money. 3 times, apparently. That $3,700 is everything I've saved since Lloyd passed. My emergency fund, the washer we need, the roof, it's all in that envelope now. Gone. Tomorrow I'll walk to the bank and withdraw what's left. And after that, I don't know. But I know something has to change. Because I can't keep being invisible in my own home. Not another year. Not another month. Not one more day. I stood outside the bank 10 minutes before it opened, holding my savings book like it was something fragile. The breeze was still cool, not yet carrying the heat of the day. I watched my reflection in the glass door hair-combed lipstick on hands tied around the book I'd been updating every month for 4 years. When they finally unlocked the door, a young man behind the counter greeted me with a cheerful, "Good morning." His name tag said Caleb. I'd like to withdraw everything, I told him. He paused, unsure if he heard me right. All of it? He asked. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "I'm sure," I said, even though my voice wasn't steady. "In cash, please." He looked at the numbers on the screen, then at me. "If it's a financial emergency," he said gently, "we do have support services. I just need the cash," I said. I didn't need advice. I needed $3,826.43, the roof fund, the new washer fund, The rainy day fund. Today was the rainy day. I walked out with a plain white envelope tucked deep inside my bag and headed straight to the utility office. A woman at the desk took the bills and the money like it was just another transaction. She handed me a receipt with the same tired look I'd seen on 100 faces behind a counter. "Paid in full," she said, just like that. On the way to work, I tried not to think about what that money had meant to me, or how fast it was gone, or how no one had even noticed I'd covered the debt that was never mine to begin with. At the hardware store, G was already restocking the paintbrushes. "Morning, Marlene," he called without looking up. "How are we doing today?" "Fine," I answered. I put on my apron and stepped behind the register. The minutes passed with a kind of dull rhythm scan smile bag repeat. Around noon, Letty called. "You still coming today?" I told her I couldn't make it, that the kids needed picking up again. She didn't hide her frustration. "You're not their maid," she said. "I'm their mother." "No," she said flatly. "You're not. You're their lifeline and their doormat. And they don't even wipe their feet." A customer came in and I said I had to go. There was no customer. I just couldn't hear that truth said out loud. That afternoon, I picked up Sadie, Caleb, and Hazel from school. They argued the whole way home. Sadie wanted to go to the mall. Hazel begged for ice cream, and Caleb kicked the back of the seat for no reason at all. "We're going home first," I said. "Then I'll take you where you want to go." They groaned in unison. The noise clawed at the edges of my head like static. Once we got home, I made them a snack, then drove Sadie to the mall, bought Hazel her ice cream, and drove Caleb around just so he wouldn't whine about being bored. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the sun had shifted and my shoulders felt heavy. My whole body did. Paul came home early and dropped himself onto the living room couch with the remote. The volume shot up like it always did. "Paul, would you mind turning it down a little? I've got a headache." He didn't even look at me. "I've been at the warehouse all day," he said. "This is my time." I went to the kitchen and started dinner. Wanda had said they'd eat out, but Paul was here and the kids were always hungry. So I cooked. At dinner, they ate in silence, fingers flicking across screens. I asked Sadie how school was. Got a shrug. Asked Paul about his shift. A grunt. Hazel said I put too much salt in the stew, pushed her plate away. Caleb knocked over his milk and didn't even flinch. After dinner, I was cleaning up when Terrence and Jolene came in. Laughing, carrying a to-go cup, and talking about the movie they'd just seen. "What's for dinner?" Terrence asked, opening the fridge. "I left some stew in a container," I told him. Jolene wrinkled her nose. "We just had that last week. I can make something else." "No, don't bother," Terrence said. "Just add more pepper." Last time it was bland. I reheated it, added the pepper, set it out in front of them, and stood at the sink washing the same dishes for the third time that day. Wanda came home late, just before 10. She looked tired, but satisfied. "Are the kids asleep?" she asked, pulling off her heels. "They're in their rooms," I said. "I don't know if they're asleep." "Paul watching TV." "Terrence, in his room." She nodded and turned to head upstairs, then paused. "Mom, can you watch the kids tomorrow? It's our anniversary. We're going out for dinner. I made plans with Letty." She raised an eyebrow. "Letty again?" "She's my friend Wanda." "Mom, it's just one night. Your friend will understand." I agreed, said yes like I always did. She smiled, didn't say thank you, and went upstairs. I sat alone in the living room. The dishwasher hummed behind me. A clock ticked on the wall. It was almost 11. That's when I saw the envelope on the table. Must have come in the afternoon. I opened it and felt the air leave my lungs. A utility bill. A past due notice. $700. Pay in full within 3 days or lose service. That was everything. Every dollar I had managed to save since Lloyd passed. I stared at the notice for a long time, then looked around the room, the crumbs on the floor, the sound of someone's show through the walls, the shoes in the hallway that weren't mine, the lights on in rooms I didn't enter. They all think I'll always be here, that I'll always fix it. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid on top of the blanket with my shoes still on and stared at the ceiling while the house creaked and shifted around me. I thought about Lloyd, what he'd say if he saw what this place had become. The next morning, no one knocked on my door. No one asked what was for breakfast. No one left a note. I walked into the kitchen and saw the mess. Crumbs, dishes, juice on the floor. I looked at it, then I turned around, grabbed my bag, and left. It was my day off. I had one thing to do. Letty was already at the cafe. She sat by the window with her bright scarf and her usual expression, half waiting, half warning. "You look awful," she said when I sat down. I opened my mouth, but the tears came first. Not loud ones, just slow, steady, quiet. She didn't ask anything else, just waved the waitress over. 2 coffees, and blueberry muffins, and some water, please. I cried through half of it, and when I finished, she said just one thing. "They don't love you, Marlene. They use you." I didn't argue. I couldn't, because something inside me already knew she was right. Letty waited while I pulled myself together. She didn't push, didn't rush me, just sat there sipping her coffee and letting the silence stretch between us. When I finally stopped crying, I reached for a napkin, then another, and she slid a glass of water across the table. I told her everything. The unpaid bills, the savings I'd spent, the suggestion that I move into a retirement home, how they'd looked right past me like I was already gone. She listened the same way she always had, quiet, steady, unblinking. When I was finished, she didn't say, "I'm sorry." She said, "Marlene, you need to talk to someone, a lawyer. Find out what your rights are." I shook my head. "That seems drastic." "No," she said. "What's drastic is them trying to push you out of your own home." She opened her purse and pulled out a small spiral notebook, flipped to a page where she'd written something down and tore it out. Hadley Drummond. He helped my niece with a tenant situation last year. Said he was patient and thorough. I held the paper between my fingers. The name, the number. It didn't look like much. "You don't have to do anything," Letty said. "Just talk to him. Ask questions." I nodded, but I wasn't sure. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "You're not alone, Marlene. Whatever happens, you're not alone." After we parted ways, I didn't go straight home. I walked to the small city park 3 blocks over and sat on a bench beneath the oak trees. It was cool in the shade, and the breeze carried just enough sound to drown out my thoughts. I stared at the paper in my hand, thought about what it would mean to make the call, what it would mean if I didn't. I took out my phone and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. Drummond Law Office. The voice on the line answered. "How can I help you?" "My name is Marlene Whitaker," I said. "I need to speak to someone about a family matter. The receptionist told me Mr. Drummond had an opening at 2 o'clock. I said I'd be there." I still had a couple of hours, so I walked to the library, picked up a novel from the new arrival shelf and sat in one of the padded chairs near the window. I tried to read, but the words kept slipping away. All I could think about was what had gone wrong. When exactly it had shifted. When my home had stopped feeling like mine. At 1:45, I made my way to the address the receptionist had given me. The building was a narrow 2-story with blue shutters and a small brass plaque out front. Inside, a young woman behind a desk greeted me with a smile. "Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Drummond is expecting you. Please come in." She led me into a quiet office with a wide window and a desk made of polished wood. A man stood to greet me, mid-50s, maybe older, with graying dark hair and a calm, clear expression. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, offering his hand. I'm Hadley Drummond. Please have a seat. I sat in the chair across from him, unsure where to begin. But once I started talking, the words came easily. I told him about Lloyd, about the funeral, the promises the kids made, how Terrence and Jolene moved in, then Wanda and Paul. I told him about how the months became years, the bills, the chores, the noise, the dinner conversation, the suggestion that I find a place with medical staff and bingo nights. He listened without interrupting, taking notes in a neat, slanted handwriting. When I finished, he looked up. Is the house in your name? Yes, mine and Lloyd's. But after he passed, it transferred fully to me. And there are no written agreements between you and your children? No, nothing formal. Do they pay rent? Utilities? Contribute to household costs? I hesitated. Not really. They give me small amounts here and there, but I cover most things. He nodded, then set his pen down. Legally, your children are considered informal tenants. Since there's no lease, you have the right to terminate their stay with appropriate notice. In this state, that means 30 days. I looked at him, unsure I'd heard right. You're saying I can ask them to leave? Yes, he said gently. You can. And if they refuse, you can pursue formal eviction through the courts. But often, the notice is enough. It feels cruel, I said. He leaned forward slightly. If these were strangers, boarders say, and they weren't paying, weren't contributing, and were pressuring you to vacate the property, would you still feel that way? I looked down at my hands. You're allowed to set boundaries, he said. Even with family. Especially with family. I didn't say anything. The room felt still. Not heavy, just still. He pulled open a drawer and took out a folder. If you'd like, I can prepare the official notice. You don't have to sign it today. What happens if I sign it and then change my mind? Then you can withdraw it, he said. It's your right. Nothing is final until you want it to be. I sat for a long moment, then nodded. He asked for names, dates. When each family moved in, I gave him everything. He filled out the form with methodical care, then turned it toward me. I read the notice. It was direct, unemotional. It listed Terrence and Jolene, Wanda, and Paul, and the 3 grandchildren as current occupants. It gave them 30 days to vacate the property at 84 Maple Street. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered. I remembered Hazel's handprint on the refrigerator, Caleb's sneakers in the hallway, the noise of the cartoons Paul always watched too loud, the dinner plates that never got rinsed. I signed. He made copies, gave me one. You'll need to deliver this in person, or leave it somewhere obvious. That way there's no dispute. What if they get angry? They might, he said. But anger isn't always a reason not to act, especially when your well-being is on the line. I stood and thanked him. He told me the consultation was free, and to call if I needed help with anything else. Outside, the clouds were low and gray, but it hadn't started to rain. I didn't go home right away. I walked. Almost without realizing it, I ended up on Letty's porch. She opened the door, saw the papers in my hand, and stepped aside. "Tea's on," she said. "Sit down and tell me what he said." I passed her the envelope and sat down at the table. The kitchen smelled like ginger and lemon. She read the notice. Her face didn't change. "Good," she said. "That's the first step. I don't know if I can go through with it." "You don't have to yet," she said. "But you could, and that's what matters." We sat there for a while without saying much. She poured tea, and the steam curled around the edge of the cup. Later, as I walked back home, the envelope tucked deep in my bag again, I didn't know what I was going to do next. But for the first time in years, I knew I had a choice. I came home with the envelope tucked deep in my purse, the way you carry something fragile. I didn't know if I'd hand it over that day. I just knew I had it. The house was loud as ever, TV blaring, water running upstairs, someone slamming a cabinet in the kitchen. I stood in the entryway and listened to the sounds of my own home, not one of them mine. Wanda called down from the top of the stairs. "Mom, Hazel has a birthday party on Saturday. Can you take her?" "It starts at noon." I said yes before I even thought about it. Then I went to my room and shut the door, and for once nobody followed me. That night, I laid the envelope on my dresser and stared at it like it might say something on its own. I didn't touch it again until morning. I woke up early, earlier than usual. The house was still dark, the hallway quiet. I got dressed in the same clothes I always wore on days off, a soft green sweater, jeans, the loafers I only wore indoors so they'd last longer. I made myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table watching the sunlight stretch slowly across the floor. I wrote out the kids' schedules on a notepad just in case. Hazel's allergy list, Caleb's pickup times, the names of their pediatrician dentist favorite cereal brands. I didn't know if they'd need it, but I wrote it anyway. Wanda came in first, already dressed for work, phone to her ear. She grabbed a granola bar and barely looked at me. Paul followed, asked where the car keys were. I handed them to him. Then came Terrence, rubbing his eyes, asking if there was coffee. I told him I left some in the pot. Jolene swept in behind him with a shopping bag, said, "We'll be out most of the day. Can you grab Sadie from practice?" I didn't answer right away. I stood and walked to the living room, took the envelope from my purse and placed it gently on the coffee table. "You all might want to sit down," I said. Terrence frowned. "What is this?" "It's a formal notice," I said. "I've given it a lot of thought, and I've decided I need the house back." Wanda stepped forward, looking confused. "You mean for guests or a renovation?" "No," I said. "I need you all to find other arrangements. I'm asking you to move out. I'm giving you 30 days. There was a pause so long and thick, it felt like the air had stopped moving. "You're evicting us," Paul finally said, half laughing. "I'm giving notice," I said calmly, "legally and respectfully." Jolene scoffed. "You've lost your mind." Wanda walked over and picked up the envelope. Read the letter, her fingers trembling. "Who put you up to this?" she asked. "Was it Letty?" "No one made me do anything." Terrence's voice rose. "We've lived here for years. The kids have rooms here. Hazel has a bunk bed. And they'll have rooms wherever you go," I said. "But this house isn't working for me anymore. I need space. I need quiet." "You're going to be alone," Wanda snapped. "You think that's better?" "I don't know what it'll be yet," I said. "But I do know I won't feel invisible anymore." Paul shook his head and muttered something under his breath. Caleb walked into the room, then rubbing his eyes. He looked at all of us, then said, "What's going on?" Wanda turned toward him. "Nothing, sweetie. Grandma's just confused." I didn't respond. I picked up my coffee mug, rinsed it in the sink, and left the room. That day, no one spoke to me more than they had to. The television stayed off. Dinner was quiet. The envelope sat untouched on the edge of the counter. At work the next morning, G asked if everything was all right at home. I finally told them told them they had to move out. He nodded slowly. "That's something. Letty called during my lunch break. I told her how it had gone." "You didn't stutter?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not once." "You sounded like yourself again," she said. "Didn't you?" I didn't answer, but she already knew. That weekend was tense. Jolene slammed doors. Wanda moved through the house like a ghost. Paul spent most of his time in the garage. The kids asked questions I didn't know how to answer gently. On Monday, I came home from work to find a "for rent" sign in the front yard. Jolene had taped it to a yardstick and stuck it into the flower bed. I took it down. Didn't say a word. Later that night, Wanda knocked on my door. "You really going through with this?" she asked. "I am. Where are we supposed to go?" "There are apartments on Monroe and houses in Oakview. You're both employed. You'll figure it out." Her voice dropped. "You're really doing this to your grandchildren. I'm doing this for me," I said, "so I can still be their grandmother." She didn't say anything more, just turned and left. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the light go down behind the trees. A cool breeze came in from the east. I hadn't sat on that porch alone in years. I used to do it with Lloyd. He'd talk about planting another row of tomatoes. I'd tell him we didn't have the time. We never thought we'd run out of space before we ran out of time. I stayed out there until the porch light flickered on automatically. Inside, I could hear the usual movement footsteps upstairs, a door opening, a faucet turning on. But none of it was mine to manage. Not anymore. I slept better that night than I had in months. I started packing up the attic on a Saturday morning while the rest of the house was asleep. That room had been quiet for years, tucked under the slope of the roof, filled with the sort of things nobody ever really needed, but never quite threw away. I carried down an old rocking chair, a box of winter coats, a dusty floor lamp that still worked if you twisted the cord just right. I wasn't moving out, I was making space. By mid-morning, I'd filled 2 donation bags and 3 more for the trash. The attic felt lighter, and so did I. Hazel was the first to notice. She stood in the hallway outside my room with her arms crossed. "Why are you taking stuff out of the attic, just making room?" I said. "For what?" I smiled. "For whatever comes next." She didn't like that answer. None of them did. The 30-day clock kept ticking, and with each day, the house changed in small but steady ways. I cleared the pantry of expired boxes and old jars, claimed a cabinet just for myself, and moved my things out of the cramped bathroom I used to share with the kids. I started using the guest bathroom again, the one with the wide mirror and the little orchid by the sink that I used to replace once a month. I called the electric company and asked them to put the bill back in my name only. Same with the water and the internet. I canceled the extra streaming subscriptions, kept the basics. Every call, every small shift pulled something back toward me. Not out of spite, just because I could. Letty came over one evening after work. I made a pot of soup and set the table for 2. "Smells like when we were girls," she said as she walked in. "You used to make soup after church if it rained." "It rained yesterday," I said. "Figured it counted." We ate at the kitchen table. No interruptions, no questions about dessert. She asked how it was going, and I told her the truth. They're still here. They still think I'll change my mind. "And will you?" "No," I said. "I don't think I will." That night, I pulled out the folder Hadley Drummond had given me and made copies of the notice just in case. Then, I wrote a list of every room in the house. Not chores, not things to fix. Just a list: kitchen, front porch, back bedroom, laundry room. Every place I planned to reclaim. Paul started sleeping on the couch, more often muttering that his back hurt, that his job was stressful, that none of this was fair. Wanda barely looked at me during dinner. Jolene left takeout boxes everywhere, and when I cleaned them up, she slammed drawers. Terrence asked what my endgame was. "To live in my home again," I said. "And what about us? You'll live in yours." The tension in the house thickened by the day, but I didn't retreat. I started waking up early to make my own breakfast bacon toast and the same dark roast Lloyd always liked. I took my meals at the small table by the window in the den. From there, I could see the garden coming back to life. Daffodils pushing through the soil. Buds on the rose bush I'd once thought was done for. One afternoon, I found Caleb playing in the backyard alone, the way Lloyd used to sit with him quiet, just watching the trees sway. He looked up when I came out. "Grandma," he said, "can I still come visit after we move?" "Of course," I said, and meant it. "Will there still be waffles?" "If you call ahead," I said, smiling, "and maybe help with the dishes." He grinned and kicked a pebble across the grass. It was easier with the kids. They hadn't made the choices. They were just caught in the middle. Wanda and Paul had another argument one night, this time about a moving company. I heard my name tossed in, then the word ungrateful. I didn't go down. I folded laundry and waited for the house to settle. By the third week, Jolene packed 2 suitcases and left without a word. Just a note on the fridge saying she was staying with her sister until things settled down. Terrence stayed, but quieter. He didn't ask me for coffee anymore. Didn't joke about the TV. Just kept to himself. I got a letter from the county that week, something about reassessing the property value. I read it twice, then made a copy and added it to the folder. I didn't know yet what it would mean, but I wasn't going to let it surprise me. On Sunday, Letty and I went to the church rummage sale. I bought a little painting of a red barn and some old linen napkins. She bought a lamp and a coat with the tag still on it. "Anything else?" she asked. I paused. "I saw a table. Not sure it'll fit." She smiled. "Then make room." That night, I brought the table home. Small, sturdy, with a rounded edge and carved legs. I set it in the corner of the living room where the old toy bin used to be. It looked right there, like it had been waiting. Terrence came in and looked at it. "That new to me," I said. He nodded, but didn't say more. I made chicken and rice for dinner and set the table with the linen napkins. Wanda took her plate to her room. Paul didn't come down at all. I sat with Hazel and Caleb. We passed the salt, talked about school, and laughed when Hazel dropped her fork and said, "Oops, that chicken's slippery." It was the first time in a long time the house felt warm again. After they went upstairs, I rinsed the dishes, wiped the table, and turned off the lights. The hallway was quiet. My room was quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote one more note to myself. Keep going. You're almost there. It rained on the 29th day. Slow and steady, the kind that taps on the windows and pools in the driveway. I was in the kitchen drying dishes when I saw a car pull up. Not one I recognized. A woman stepped out holding a clipboard in one hand, a white envelope in the other. She rang the bell twice firm and measured. Wanda opened the door before I could. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for Marlene Trask," the woman said. I stepped forward. "That's me." She nodded and handed me the envelope. "This is from the county housing office. Your name's on the notice, but we were informed of an appeal filed under the same address. I'm just here to confirm receipt." I thanked her and shut the door before Wanda could ask anything else. The envelope was thin light. Inside was a single sheet. I read it standing up. Paul had filed an injunction. He claimed wrongful eviction, said the house was in a state of joint residence, and that I hadn't followed proper relocation protocol for extended family dependents. I reread the letter 3 times. The language was formal but clear. The hearing was set for the following Thursday. I'd need to appear. So would he. Wanda and Terrence stood in the hallway waiting. "What is it?" she asked. I handed her the letter. Her mouth tightened as she read it. "He's not trying to stay. He's trying to scare you. He filed this through a legal channel," I said. "It's not a scare tactic. It's a decision." Terrence took the paper next. "It says he listed the kids, said they'd be displaced." "They're not on the deed," I said. "None of you are." "You sure you want to do this?" Wanda asked. "Court lawyers, this isn't going to be simple." I looked at her. It was never simple. I spent that evening in the den, phone in hand folder open beside me. I called Hadley Drummond first, told her about the notice. She asked me to scan a copy and send it over. Said she'd take care of it. Next, I called Letty. I told her everything. She offered to come with me. I said yes. The house was tense again. Paul stayed in his room most of the time. Wanda walked around like she was bracing for a storm. Jolene didn't come back. On the morning of the hearing, I wore the same navy blue blouse I'd worn to Lloyd's retirement dinner. The buttons were still tight, but it fit. I brushed my hair, added a little powder, and waited for Letty to pick me up. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered. We sat in a plain beige room with a long table down the middle. Paul came in with a man in a gray suit. I didn't know if he was a friend or a lawyer. He nodded at me, didn't say a word. The judge was a woman, maybe late 50s. She looked tired, but attentive. She read over the notice, asked a few questions about residence history, ownership, and dependency claims. Paul spoke softly. He said he'd lived there for years, that his kids considered it their home. He said the sudden notice had disrupted their stability, that I hadn't provided alternative housing options. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Trask, do you have documentation of ownership?" I handed her the deed and the property tax receipts. She glanced through them, then set them aside. "Have any of the occupants contributed financially in the past 6 months?" she asked. "No," I said. She turned back to Paul. "And you've had prior conversations about moving out?" Paul hesitated. "She never made it official until the letter." "She didn't have to," the judge said. "This isn't a co-op. She's the owner. There's no lease, no rent, and no guardianship arrangement." The room went quiet. The judge looked at both of us. "This isn't a criminal matter. It's not even a formal eviction case. What you filed was a relocation objection, and based on the documents, I'm denying it. You'll have 5 business days to vacate. After that, the homeowner is within her rights to file for trespass." Paul didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me. He just gathered his papers and left the room. Letty exhaled softly beside me. "That's it," she whispered. But I didn't move. Not right away. Outside, the air was cool and damp. We got in her car and sat for a minute before heading home. She reached over and squeezed my hand once, then let go. Back at the house, I walked in and set my purse down. Wanda was waiting in the kitchen. "Well," she asked. "They have 5 days," I said. "Then they need to be gone." She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "Caleb has a game on Saturday. You still coming?" "I'll be there," I said. "Of course I will." I made tea and sat in the den with the door open. The sounds of the house moved around me, footsteps overhead, a door creaking, water running. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Not just in the quiet, but in the air itself. I went to bed early, slept with the window cracked open. The breeze smelled faintly of honeysuckle. In the morning, I started another list. They started packing that Thursday night. Wanda filled 2 suitcases, one for herself and one for Caleb and Sadie. Paul stayed mostly in the garage, sorting through boxes like he was looking for something he'd lost years ago. Hazel ran from room to room, barefoot, chasing a balloon that kept getting caught in corners. I made dinner tuna casserole and green beans and left it on the stove. Nobody touched it. By Saturday morning, the porch was lined with bags, rolled blankets, a stuffed giraffe, and a high chair nobody had used in months. The back of Terrence's truck was loaded with plastic tubs and a laundry basket filled with mismatched shoes. I stood at the kitchen window and watched Jolene double-knotting the tarp with bungee cords. Her ponytail whipped around in the wind, the sky just starting to cloud. Caleb came inside carrying a shoebox filled with his rock collection. He stopped in front of me. "You keeping the swing?" he asked. "I might," I said. "Why?" He shrugged. "I like it here." I nodded. So did I. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but Jolene called him from the driveway. He turned and ran out the shoebox, bouncing against his chest. Around noon, Terrence came inside. "We'll be out by 3, he said. "The kids are hungry, so we're stopping for burgers once we're packed." I nodded. He hesitated at the doorway, then added, "Thanks for everything, Mom." I didn't answer. Wanda left last. She carried Hazel on one hip and a diaper bag over her shoulder. Paul followed, carrying the last suitcase. Neither of them looked back. I stayed in the hallway until I heard the front door close and the truck engine fade down the street. I walked through each room slowly. The living room had a few indentations where the old couch used to sit. The dining table looked bigger, without the stack of bills and plastic pencil cases. In the hallway, a thumbtack still stuck in the wall where a chore chart used to hang. I pulled it out and placed it in the drawer with the scissors and rubber bands. Upstairs, the bathroom smelled like lavender shampoo. Someone had left a pink toothbrush in the cup. I rinsed it out and dropped it in the trash. Wanda's room was almost empty, but a single sock was caught under the bed. I didn't bother picking it up. In the den, I pulled the curtains open wide. The light came in soft and full, making the dust visible in the air. I sat on the love seat and let my body settle. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore, just still. By evening, I'd moved all their forgotten things to the porch. A box of toy dinosaurs, a hoodie with a broken zipper, an old phone charger. I set them near the step in case someone came back. No one did. On Sunday morning, I made pancakes, just 2. Ate them in my robe while the radio played an old Glenn Campbell song. I washed the plate, dried it, and put it away. No extra dishes in the sink, no rush. Letty came by after church. She brought a pie. We sat on the porch with slices on paper plates and coffee in chipped mugs. She asked if it felt different. "It does," I said. "It really does." "Lonely?" she asked. "Not yet." She stayed an hour. We talked about the azaleas and the neighbor's new mailbox. When she left, I went inside and opened the windows. Let the breeze sweep through the hallway and into the kitchen. It smelled like clean floorboards and rain-soaked grass. That night, I started rearranging furniture. I moved the sewing table into the den, rolled up the carpet, and vacuumed under the couch. I emptied every drawer in the upstairs hallway and filled a trash bag with dried-out markers, expired coupons, and broken barrettes. I stripped the twin beds in both upstairs rooms and donated the linens Monday morning. I made new signs for the closets. One now reads linen storage. The other says guest room. On Wednesday, I bought a new doormat. It says, "Welcome." That weekend, I drove myself to Caleb's soccer game. I brought a thermos of coffee and a lawn chair. Sat behind the goalpost with the other grandparents. When Caleb spotted me, he waved. I waved back. Wanda sat across the field, 2 rows higher. She didn't look over. After the game, he ran up to me, cheeks flushed, hair damp. "We lost," he said. "But I scored once." "You did good," I said. "Really good." He hugged me without asking. I held him a moment, then stepped back and smoothed his hair. "You want to come over sometime?" I asked. "Just for an afternoon." "Can I bring my rocks?" he asked. "You can bring all of them." Wanda didn't say much when I dropped him off. Just nodded and took his bag. I didn't stay long. That evening, I sat on the front porch and watched the sun go down behind the oak trees. The sky turned a color I hadn't seen in weeks, or maybe I just hadn't noticed it. The swing creaked once in the wind, then stilled. 2 weeks after they left, I found a yellow envelope tucked inside the mailbox. No stamp. Just my name in Caleb's handwriting, letters wide and a little uneven. Inside was a folded drawing of the porch swing, and underneath it, a message written in blue marker. "Grandma's house is my favorite place." I set it on the windowsill above the sink, next to the tiny potted basil plant I'd started from seed. The next morning, I cleaned out the hallway closet and found a stack of Wanda's old paperwork wedged behind an umbrella stand. Bill's appointment slips a crumpled birthday card. I nearly tossed the whole bundle, but something stopped me. At the very bottom was a sealed manila envelope marked, "For Mom." I sat down on the stairs and opened it slowly. It was a letter. 3 pages, front and back. Wanda's handwriting had always been tidy, but this was rushed with crossed-out words and whole sentences scribbled in the margins. She wrote about the early days when she first came home with Caleb and didn't know how to warm a bottle when she called me at 2:00 a.m., crying over a teething fever. She said she hadn't meant to take advantage, but somewhere along the line, she got used to the idea that I'd always catch what she dropped, that I'd never say no. She didn't know when she started seeing me as the safety net instead of a person. She apologized for the things said at dinner that night. Said she saw it all differently now, not because someone made her, but because the quiet afterward had forced her to look hard at what she'd built and what she hadn't. She ended by saying she wasn't sure how to fix things, but she hoped one day I'd answer if she knocked. I folded the letter back up and placed it inside the recipe box under P between peach cobbler and pot roast. Then I opened the windows again and let the breeze move through the house. That weekend, I made a fresh batch of applesauce and packed 2 jars for Caleb. I dropped them off at their place with a note, "No rush, just love." I didn't hear anything for 3 days. Then, on Tuesday evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Caleb standing there with Wanda beside him holding a plastic container of lasagna. He smiled. "Mom made dinner," he said, "for you this time." Wanda didn't speak right away, but her eyes said enough. I stepped back and held the door open. We ate at the kitchen table. No big speeches, no sudden resolutions. Just lasagna, a tossed salad, and Caleb talking about school. When they left, she hugged me, the kind of hug that says, "I don't have the words yet, but I'm working on it." That night, I sat on the porch swing with a blanket over my lap, the cicadas humming in the trees. The house behind me was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full of space, room to breathe, room to begin again if that's what was coming. Some things take years to mend. Others just need a clean porch, an open door, and the patience to wait for the knock. Thanks for listening. If this story reminded you of someone you love or someone you're learning to forgive, I hope you'll take a moment to share it. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. There's always another story waiting on the porch.